In this video, we are going to go through a Node.js 21 version's new features. The Node.js 21 stable version has been released in February 2024 and it comes with a bunch of improvements. There are a lot of new stuff that is introduced which Node.js claims make a developer life much easier. What are those new features and what exactly they mean for us and what difference they make for us as a developer. So first I'm going to upgrade my node version. So if I show you, I'm running on the node.js 21, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to uh, use the nvm, which is the tool to basically use the multiple node.js version. So I'm going to install the version 21.0.0 and let's see, it is downloading that, and our node.js 21 will be installed in a moment, and it is installed, it seems. So what I can do is I can just simply execute this nvm use, and then I can pass the version name. With that, I basically instead that I'm going to use a node.js version 21.00. Oh, okay, so we have the version ready. Now I'm going to take you through the things. Stable fetch and Webstream's API. So this is the thing that I personally was waiting for a long time. And trust me, if you're working on a Node.js for a longer time, then stable is the word that sounds like a music to our ears. Many developers, including me, we have spent countless hours debugging like why the things are not working, and we ultimately end up using the third-party libraries for the fetching the data or making the external API calls. Now, finally, with a stable version of the fetch API, we can make an API call and just do that with a plain Node.js, and we don't need to have any dependency on the third-party libraries. So gone those old days where we used to like work with the Axios or just use the HTTP client library in case of Angular to make the API calls. Now you can do that in a Node.js itself, and it is totally stable because it has that stable flag marked, so we can expect that. Experimental with the WebSockets in Node.js 21. So we have experimental support for the WebSockets. So basically experimental words mean that it is going to be fun, dear developers, it is going to be fun debugging, and fear not. I think, but this is a good initiative. Things are going to get stabilized with the upcoming versions, but having the WebSocket support is definitely mean a lot. So finally, we don't have to rely on any third-party library, which is not maintained since the last version of Game of Thrones, probably. So you can have a built-in support for the WebSocket, something like this. WebSocket, you can create it, you can open the WebSocket, and then you can listen to the messages. So WebSocket is a really powerful if you are developing applications where you need a concurrency and the continuous data. So this line is basically a very powerful line. It just basically says that, hey server, I listening to a data that you are sending, and I'm listening to your data, and please keep on sending that data, and I will also give you acknowledge on that. So you can utilize this for multiple purposes like the video rendering, audio rendering. You can have something very interactive application. You have a chat application between the multiple nodes, multiple clients sending the chat messages. So WebSocket is a really powerful, and we used to do that with a socket.io libraries like those which were doing a quite good stuff, but with the support of WebSocket and a Node.js itself, I think things are going to be more cleaner. If you ask me like what are the limitations of it, I still see like the existing WebSocket implementation that developers have done in their application. What would be a way to migrate them to a Node.js primitive WebSocket? That is going to be an interesting thing to see how Node.js is going to give us support to handle that transition. I think it is in the experimental mode. So though it sounds adventurous, but it is a bit risky to completely rely on this primitive WebSocket. If you are relying on the WebSocket, there are good chances that it may break your entire application. So use it, but with a caution. Array grouping. So finally, we have a native array grouping support from the Node.js to organize your clutter array elements and structure them in a proper way. So let's say if you have an array like this where you have the objects inside, let's say fruits, and they have a name and type, and imagine you have the more objects entries over here, then you can group them using the group by. This is the node.js primitive, and you can group them depending on the type or name or any other property that you have. So I think having this group by support in the node.js is really useful in the cases because you don't have to rely much on the array methods, especially like filter and find. Those method basically takes an extra computation. Support for globs in Node.js and test center. So for those of you who don't know what is a globs, so it's basically like finding the files which matches a certain extension or certain name regex parameter. It finds them, and you can perform some Node.js command on those specific files only. Just an example, you can run the test cases which has the .test.js extension. So you can run something like node test and then double asterisk mark, and you can give this wildcard expression which basically tells that target the files which has this wildcard expression and run the test on it only. I think this is really helpful if you're trying to run the test cases on the files in your project and you want to target a specific set of files only, then writing something custom which basically you can specify or write your own script. Like in case of the jest or in a testing framework, you specify the jest config jest. There you basically write your own script that targets certain files, let's say .spec.ts or .test.ts or js, whatever you have. I think with this support, that thing we no longer need, and it basically makes code more readable. So I think this is again helpful. ESM experimental default type flag. Wow, this is a big deal. I mean, trust me, I'm going to elaborate you why it is a big deal. This makes a real big difference because it solves a problem that we had for the years now. You remember that we have two types of modules, CommonJS and the ESM. And when you are dealing with those modules, you have to specify them in your project configuration somewhere. And if you have a mismatch between them, it creates a lot of headache. With this flag, you can finally specify that which type of a module you are going to use, and you don't no longer need to mention that in some configuration file for your project. I think this is the game changer for the people who are struggling with the ES module and the common JS module mismatch, infamous mismatch headache problem. So I think with the experimental flag, you can specify something like this. You can tell Node.js that default type should be module, and then you can specify your script. So whenever you will compile the your Node.js file, your JavaScript file, it will use the default type as a module, ES module. And you can also like specify common JS or whatever you want. But with this, like you have a total control over that, which moduling type you want to use. And the beauty of it, you can tell the Node.js that, hey, I prefer to use the ES module over CommonJS or vice versa. And then without adding anything in your package.json or without touching anything. But I still think that there are some practical implications that we have to think about, because it's like Node.js is giving a Swiss Army knife to our developers with this flag support, and we have to use it carefully, because if it's not used, then it is going to cause a side effect hell. So these are the benefits I see transitioning to a legacy projects. I guess if you want to transition to a ES module, then you can easily switch to a ES module without a massive overhaul. Mixed module type, you can use a common JS and the ES module mix in a mixed manner. Simplified configuration, with this flag you don't have to maintain so many things in your package JSON. You can keep it clutter free, and that means like a less code in the package.json. I think this feature is important for the people who love to experiment with the module system. They have a necessity to switch between the module system, or if they are trying to solve the challenges that they have with migrating from one module to another module system. Global Navigator object integration. So for those of who work in the front end, they know like we can access the different properties of the navigator, and it basically helps in so many stuff. I have used it in like checking whether the tabs are active or not in the browser. You can check like if tab is active or not, go to the previous tab, next tab, or even we can use the navigator to copy the content, copy the text to a clipboard. So now we have a support for the hardware concurrency. With the hardware concurrency, we can get to know like what is the resource allocation is available, and with this, so it tells us like the logical CPU cores available for the processing, and with this information, developer can make a wise decision to use a certain number of cores, and that can basically helps in many aspects like dynamically adjusting the CPU cores, or if you have some task that needs a very heavy computation, you can put it as a, you can also customize your fallback strategy by knowing this information. Will be really beneficial in a cases of the maybe service worker or the web worker, where we offload the task to some different script. So let's try to see if it really works. I'm interested in trying this out. So it says that the number of logical CPU cores available for me is 8. So this is because of my Node.js configuration settings. I have an octa-core processor. It seems, no, it is not actually. I'm on a Mac M1, so my CPU cores, physical CPU cores are the 24 part. It said that the logical CPU cores are 8 available. It can vary depending on the setup and the configuration. I think this comes handy in algorithms where you're trying to perform a search or do a sorting. I'm more excited to see like a similar support for the GPU. There's a 3D.js which basically have enables us to use the GPU cores and which is doing really good, but I'm not sure whether the Node.js has any supports to retrieve that information of the GPU hardware. Well, to wrap it up, I think in this version of Node.js, they not only refine the core functionalities, but also introduce the forward-looking capabilities that anticipate and address the needs of a modern web development. As we integrate these updates into our work, I think it is going to be a really game changer in certain scenarios. For example, WebSocket, I see tremendous potential. Stable fetch and wait stream that going to play a vital role in application that developers gonna write. I think overall there were a lot of new good stuff that has happened. There were a few also like the LLHTP strict mode enforcement, which I have not talked about in this video, or support for the global preload and the register initialize, which I feel personally that developer don't use that much. That's why I have not touched those. But if you're interested, just check the description where I have given the detailed article about the new features. So if you like this video, subscribing to my channel is a really good way to show us support. And thank you for watching. Have a great time. Take care.